You have been taught to look at a number and to bow inwardly before it. You have been trained to let a figure written in ink or shown upon a page dictate your state of mind, your sense of worth, your peace, and even your hope for tomorrow. You rise and fall emotionally with a sum that carries no life of its own. And yet, I tell you now, with absolute certainty, that this number has no power. It never did. It never will. The power you fear does not belong to your bank account. It belongs to you, and only to you. You have reversed the order of creation. You have made the servant your master, and the master your servant. You consult the shadow instead of the substance. You wait upon the echo instead of the voice. You ask the reflection what it will give you, forgetting that the reflection only repeats what has already been commanded within. You serve what was created to serve you. And this single inversion is the root of all financial suffering. Your account is not the cause of your condition. It is the record of it. It is not your future. It is your past made visible. It does not decide what you shall become. It only reveals what you have already assumed yourself to be. And because you do not know this, you stand each day before your own creation and mistake it for fate. The world has instructed you to believe that money moves according to forces outside your influence. You have been told it obeys the will of markets, the tide of economies, the decisions of distant men, the cycle of seasons, the rise and fall of nations. And so you have learned to wait, to hope, to fear, and to struggle. You have learned to feel small before circumstances you believe to be large. But I say to you now that this too is illusion. It always was. The observer is the creator. The witness is the one who writes the script. The consciousness that beholds is the consciousness that forms. You are not standing inside a world that acts upon you. You are standing within your own awareness, watching it rearrange itself according to your deepest assumptions. You are not here by accident. You did not stumble into this mystery by chance. You are here because something within you already knows that the explanations you were given are incomplete. The greatest error of man is not that he lacks money, nor that he loses it, nor that he struggles to attain it. The greatest error is that he believes the cause lies outside himself. From that single belief flows anxiety, effort, envy, despair, and endless comparison. From that single belief he becomes a servant to effects, chasing what he himself has first projected. Your bank balance is not a fact in the way you think. It is a fact. It is an image. It is a frozen state. It is a visible symbol of an invisible condition. It is yesterday's feeling made solid. It is your habitual assumption hardened into form. And because you are unaware of this, you look at the symbol and feel powerless before it, not knowing that it has no source outside your own being. You would never kneel before your reflection in a mirror and plead with it to become more beautiful. You would never beg an echo to change its sound. Yet you kneel before numbers and plead for relief, never realizing that you are addressing an effect and neglecting the cause. You are attempting to change the shadow instead of the body that casts it. They told you money was power. They told you money was freedom. They told you money was security. And in believing these things, you surrendered your inner authority. You tied your peace to a condition. You made your emotional life dependent upon a symbol. And then you wondered why peace felt so fragile. I tell you this now with a clarity that admits no compromise. So consciousness is the only power. The awareness that says I am is the only cause. Everything else is arrangement, reflection, and response. You do not live in a world that explains you. You live in a world that expresses you. It may shock you to hear this. It may even disturb you. For if it is true, then you can no longer blame circumstance for condition. You can no longer locate the fault in timing, in others, in systems, or in fate. If it is true, then the entire responsibility returns home to you. And this is precisely why most men resist it. They prefer to be ruled by chance than to be responsible for creation. You have been taught to look outward for permission, permission to prosper, permission to rest, permission to feel secure. You wait for the world to offer proof before you allow yourself peace. You wait for the figure to change before you allow yourself to breathe. And so your breath becomes shallow, your mind becomes restless, your days become negotiations with anxiety. But the law does not consult appearances before it acts. The law answers only to consciousness. It moves not at the request of circumstance, but at the decree of assumption. And the assumption that rules your life most powerfully is never the one you speak aloud. It is the one you secretly feel to be true. You say you want abundance, yet you feel cautious. You say you desire plenty, yet you feel hesitant. You say you believe in supply, yet you feel tense. And the law, which never listens to your words, but always to your feeling, responds faithfully to the state you inhabit, not the wish you announce. You were not born to negotiate with conditions. You were born to generate them. You were not created to chase effects. You were created to move causes. But somewhere along the path of forgetting, you accepted a world where things happen to you instead of from you. And having accepted it, you began to live as though it were true. Look carefully at your life, and you will see this law written everywhere. The man who feels himself prosperous walks differently long before his purse grows heavy. The woman who feels herself cherished moves differently long before the outer world responds. The student who feels himself capable studies with an ease that no fear-driven effort can match. In every case, the state comes first. The condition follows. And yet when it comes to money, you have been trained to believe the reverse. You have been taught that only after the condition improves may the feeling follow. Only after the number rises may you feel secure. Only after the account grows may you feel at peace. This is the great deception. This is the chain that binds the mind. It is not wealth that brings peace. It is the assumption of peace that brings wealth. It is not abundance that brings freedom. It is the consciousness of freedom that brings abundance. It is not security that produces calm. It is calm that summons security. You look at your account and you imagine it to be a judge. You imagine it passes sentence on your future. You imagine it renders verdict on your safety. And every time you do this, you are surrendering your throne to your own creation. You are placing the crown upon the effect and stripping it from the cause. The illusion of the economy is no different from the illusion of fate. Both are stories men tell when they do not know who they are. Both are masks that cover the deeper truth that all things proceed from consciousness and return to it. You are not imprisoned by numbers. You are not limited by the movement of coin. You are not held back by unseen forces. You are only ever limited by the state you consent to occupy. And this is why I speak not of effort, but of identity. For you do not work your way into a new life. You assume your way into it. You do not force your way into abundance. You awaken into it. You do not conquer lack. You outgrow it. The great revelation that will change your relation to money forever is not a method, nor a practice, nor a plan. It is a recognition so simple that the mind rejects it at once. A recognition so absolute that once it is seen, it cannot be unseen. It is this: you are the source, not the stream. You are the cause, not the echo. You are the giver of life to every figure that appears before you. When you truly see this, you will never again check a balance with fear. You may observe it, you may note it, but you will no longer kneel before it. You will no longer argue with it. You will no longer beg it for permission to feel whole. I am not here to offer you motivation. Motivation rises and falls. I am not here to offer you comfort. Comfort fades when conditions change. I am here to unveil a law that never alters, never weakens, never forgets. A law that responds faithfully to what you are conscious of being, whether you know it or not, whether you welcome it or not. You have been using this law all your life, but you have been using it blindly. And now you have come to the point where blindness is no longer sufficient. You have reached the place within yourself where the soul begins to ask a deeper question. Not how do I get more, but who is the one that gets? You are not here by accident. You are here because something in you is ready to reverse the great inversion. You are here because something in you is prepared to reclaim the throne from the shadow and return it to the source. You are here because something in you already senses that the story you have been living is not the story you were born to embody. From this moment forward, I ask only that you listen, not with fear, not with hope, but with recognition. For the truth I will speak does not need your belief to operate. It requires only your awareness to awaken. And when it awakens, Your account will not be the first thing that changes. You will. The great deception that has ruled the mind of man for ages is the belief that his good exists somewhere outside of himself. He looks into the world and sees objects, people, systems, movements, and he concludes that these things are causes. He believes that money moves independently of him, that it travels through channels not of his making, that it obeys laws foreign to his own being. And in accepting this belief, he unknowingly commits the only real error there is, the error of separation. From the moment man accepts the idea that his supply is out there, he creates distance between himself and the very thing he desires. He imagines a gap, he imagines a journey, he imagines a struggle, and every imagined distance becomes a lived delay. Every imagined obstacle becomes a lived resistance. He does not realize that he is not discovering reality. He is arranging it. The ancient story speaks of a fall, but not a fall from grace, as you were taught. It speaks of a fall from unity into division, from knowing into believing, from being into seeking. It says that man ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and in that moment his eyes were opened. They were opened not to truth, but to duality. He began to see himself as separate from life, rather than as life itself. Before that moment, there was no inside and outside. There was only being, no lack, because there was no comparison, no struggle, because there was no distance, no money problem, because there was no concept of supply and demand. There was only fullness expressing itself as existence. But when man accepted the idea of good and evil, of gain and loss, of having and not having, he split his world into pieces. He divided cause from effect. He divided self from source. And in that division, abundance became something to pursue, instead of something to embody. The so-called expulsion from paradise was not a physical event. It was a movement of consciousness. Man did not leave a garden. He left a state. He left the state of effortless knowing and entered the state of anxious seeking. He left the state where all was given and entered the state where all must be earned. He did not lose supply. He lost the awareness of supply. From that moment onward, he began to live as though life were happening somewhere else. He began to live as though provision traveled from outside to inside. He began to worship the shadow and forget the light that casts it, and money became the most persuasive shadow of all. He began to believe that the metal, the paper, the figures, the contracts, the symbols were the source of his security. He began to believe that his peace depended upon movements he did not control. He began to believe that his future lived in places he could not reach. And so fear was born, not because the world became dangerous, but because the mind became divided. Money did not become powerful. Man simply forgot that he was. I tell you now what few dare to accept. There is no external storehouse of wealth. There is no distant reservoir from which your life must draw. There is no outer vault that decides your share. What you call money is not substance at all. It is shadow. It is a delayed echo of feeling. It is frozen assumption. Your bank balance is yesterday's thinking made visible. It is yesterday's feeling slowed down enough for the senses to perceive it. It is not alive with power of its own. It only appears powerful because you do not see the invisible movement that produced it. You believe money is in the world because you see the world, but you do not see consciousness, and because you do not see it, you assume it is less real. Yet the very fact that you see it all is proof that consciousness was present before the object appeared. Nothing exists to you until you are aware of it. Nothing has meaning until you assign meaning to it. Nothing moves in your life until it has first been moved in your feeling. And still, generation after generation has been trained to believe the opposite. They believe the world impresses itself upon them, instead of them impressing themselves upon the world. They believe numbers shape emotions, instead of emotions shaping numbers. They believe circumstance creates identity, instead of identity creating circumstance. This is the great inversion. It is not that money exists out there and eventually finds a way to you. It is that consciousness arranges itself as money when you assume the state that corresponds to it. The invisible always comes first. The visible always follows. The inner always precedes the outer. There is no exception to this. You have never earned a single dollar by action alone. You have only ever received the echo of a state you consented to occupy. Action is not a cause. It is a channel arranged by assumption. It is the bridge, never the source. This is why two men can perform the same labor and receive vastly different rewards. This is why one man rises while another remains. This is why some seem to prosper effortlessly while others strive endlessly with little to show. The difference is not in the hands, it is in the state. You do not live in a universe of causes and effects. You live in a universe of meanings and mirrors. The world does not answer what you do, it answers what you are. And what you are is not what you declare with your lips. It is what you accept in silence. You say you want wealth, yet inwardly you accept tension. You say you desire abundance, yet inwardly you consent to concern. You say you seek ease, yet inwardly you practice effort. And the law, which never consults words, responds with perfect accuracy to the feeling you secretly nurture. The money in your life is not outside you. It is you, delayed. It is you, reflected. It is you, returning to yourself in symbolic form. And the moment you see this, the chase ends. You no longer seek money as though it were a runaway object. You begin to recognize it as a condition you are forever generating. You no longer fear its absence, because you know the source cannot be absent. You no longer worship its presence, because you know it is only a signpost pointing back to you. Separation was never real, it was assumed. And because it was assumed, it appeared real. Man assumed he was cut off from life, and life arranged itself to confirm this belief. Man assumed his good was external, and the world rearranged itself so that he would always be reaching outward. Man assumed limitation, and the mirror reflected boundaries. No devil created this illusion. No curse placed it upon the world. It was self-chosen. It was self-sustaining, and it can be self-dissolved. The moment you withdraw belief from separation, it begins to collapse. The moment you stop looking outward for permission, you begin to feel an inner authority you were never meant to lose. The moment you stop negotiating with shadows, the substance begins to respond. And now hear this carefully, for this is the point where many falter. The mind does not let go of separation easily. It has built an entire identity upon it. It has built habits of worry, habits of planning, habits of protection, habits of comparison. And when the truth first touches it, it feels threatened, not liberated. At first, the idea that money is not external will feel irresponsible. The idea that consciousness is the only cause will seem dangerous. The idea that you are the source will feel like a burden rather than a freedom. This reaction is natural. It is the last defense of the old state. But persist in the knowing, and the fear dissolves. Persist in the recognition, and the weight lifts. Persist in the truth, and the struggle loosens. You were never meant to live as a beggar in a universe of your own making. You were never designed to consult conditions before you allowed yourself peace. You were never intended to measure your worth by symbols. The so-called world of finance is not a kingdom outside you. It is a language through which consciousness expresses states. When the state changes, the language changes. When the assumption shifts, the symbols reorganize. Money is not substance. Feeling is substance. Money is not creator. Consciousness is creator. Money is not law. Awareness is law. When this is seen deeply, not understood intellectually, but felt existentially, the thirst for chasing fades. The urgency softens. The desperate calculation quiets. And something remarkable begins to happen. The mind that no longer looks outward for supply becomes inwardly rich. The heart that no longer fears lack becomes inwardly calm. The being that no longer identifies with absence becomes magnetized to form. And from that inner fullness, the outer world begins to rearrange itself without strain. You do not manifest money by demanding it. You do not attract it by watching for it. You do not compel it by force of will. You receive it by no longer perceiving yourself as separate from it. The prodigal son never traveled to poverty. He traveled to a false assumption of identity. And the moment he remembered who he was, the return required no journey. It required only recognition. You have not been wandering the world in search of supply. You have been wandering your own concepts. You have been misidentifying yourself. And because you misidentified yourself, Your world faithfully reflected your misinterpretation. Now the remembering begins. Not the remembering of techniques, not the remembering of rituals, but the remembering of who sees, the remembering of who feels, the remembering of who chooses. You are not an effect wandering through causes. You are the cause experimenting with effects. You are not the leaf in the wind. You are the wind pretending to be the leaf, and when this truth settles into feeling rather than thought, the great deception dissolves. The illusion of out there fades. The internal and external reunite. And with that reunion, the natural flow of abundance resumes, not as a reward, not as a miracle, but as the normal operation of being once the obstruction of division is removed. From here, nothing needs to be chased. It only needs to be assumed. There is a name that has been spoken by the lips of man for thousands of years without ever being truly understood. It is a name uttered casually, unconsciously, endlessly, and yet it is the most sacred utterance there is. It is not whispered in temples alone. It is not reserved for priests or prophets. It is spoken in kitchens, in bedrooms, in workshops, in moments of sorrow and moments of joy. And few ever realize that each time they speak it, they are invoking the creative power of the universe itself. That name is I Am. When Moses stood before the burning bush and asked by what name he should identify the presence that spoke to him, the answer was not a title, not a form, not a description. The answer was simply, I am that I am. Not I was, not I will be, but I am. Eternal presence, eternal being, eternal now. This was not history, it was revelation. It was the unveiling of the only cause there is. It was the declaration that consciousness itself is God, not a consciousness somewhere else, not a power above the clouds, but the very awareness that hears these words right now. I tell you, without hesitation and without symbolism, there is no other God outside of your own consciousness. There is no creative power apart from your sense of being. There is no force shaping your world except the feeling you secretly accept as true of yourself. Every time you say I am, you are not describing yourself. You are declaring a creative command. You are selecting a state. You are clothing the formless with form. You are deciding what God shall become in your experience. When you say I am poor, you are not informing yourself of a fact. You are instructing consciousness to continue expressing poverty. When you say I am struggling, you are not reporting a condition. You are authorizing its continuation. When you say I am unlucky, you are not naming chance. You are assigning identity. And when you say I am wealthy, you are not fantasizing. You are naming God. You are defining the very substance out of which your future must be shaped. Man believes that his words are weak because he judges them by their sound. He does not realize that the word I am is not a vibration in the air. It is a vibration in consciousness. It is not spoken by the mouth alone. It is spoken by feeling. It is spoken by identity. It is spoken by identity. It is spoken by acceptance. You cannot escape speaking the name of God, because you cannot escape being conscious. Every feeling of I am this or I am that is a prayer. Every silent self-definition is a decree. And the law that governs this universe is impersonal and exact. It does not interpret. It does not negotiate. It simply expresses whatever the I am assumes itself to be. This is why the ancient scripture says, to him that hath more shall be given, but to him that hath not, even that which he hath shall be taken away. This was never about possession. It was never about morality. It was never about fairness. It was about state. Hath does not mean owns. It means is conscious of having. It means dwells in the state of possession. The one who feels wealthy will become wealthier. The one who feels lacking will find even what appears to be present dissolving away. The law does not ask what you desire. It asks what you are aware of being. The law does not respond to effort. It responds to identity. The law does not measure intensity. It measures consent. And your consent is given not in your affirmations, not in your declarations, but in your quiet sense of self. If you feel yourself to be struggling, the law says yes. If you feel yourself to be secure, the law says yes. If you feel yourself to be chosen, favored, supported, the law says yes. And if you feel yourself to be forgotten, blocked, rejected, the law also says yes. There is no refusal in the universe. There is only reflection. You have been taught to behave as though you live in a world that acts upon you. I tell you, you live in a world that moves because of you. You have been educated to think that events shape your mind. I tell you, your mind shapes events and then forgets that it did so. The I am is not a thing inside you. It is you. It is not a power you possess. It is the power that possesses your experience. When you say I am, you are not pointing to something you have. You are pointing to what you are. And what you are, you must express. A state is not a place. It is not a feeling of excitement. It is not a thought that passes. A state is a position of the mind. It is a mood of being. It is the atmosphere you carry within yourself. You move from state to state every day without realizing it. In one moment, you are confident. In another, unsure. In 1 hour, you are hopeful. In the next, discouraged. And each state carries with it its own future, already implied, already encoded. You do not enter wealth by walking into a building. You enter wealth by occupying its state. You do not leave poverty by changing addresses. You leave poverty by releasing its identity. To have is not to possess externally. To have is to accept internally. To not have is not to lack in the hand. It is to deny in the heart. This is why two men can be given the same opportunity and experience opposite results. One enters with the consciousness of success. The other enters with the consciousness of doubt. The opportunity is neutral. The outcome is determined by the state. This is what it means when I say consciousness is the magnet. It does not attract from a distance. It aligns from within. It does not pull circumstances toward it. It becomes the circumstance and allows form to crystallize around it. Your bank account is not an object in your life. It is a symbol of your dominant I am in the realm of value. Not your spoken I am, but your felt I am. Not your public I am, but your secret one. That secret I am is spoken in silence when the door is closed and the world is quiet. It speaks when you look at a bill. It speaks when you think of tomorrow. It speaks when you imagine your worth. It speaks when you feel your future. And it always speaks truthfully. The tragedy is not that man speaks incorrectly. The tragedy is that he does not realize he is speaking at all. He thinks he is reacting. He thinks he is responding. He thinks he is enduring. He does not realize he is constantly declaring. He says this is just how things are. He does not know he is saying, let it remain. He says it's always been this way. He does not know he is saying, let it always be so. The law cannot distinguish between humility and belief, between realism and resignation, between fear and faith. It does not consult your philosophy. It consults only your acceptance. You are not punished for negative states. They are simply expressed. You are not rewarded for positive states. They simply harden into form. Everything you touch in your life was once an I am in you. Your present world is your past self, and your future world is forming now, quietly, faithfully, from the I am you are entertaining in this moment. When you truly grasp this, responsibility returns to its rightful owner. Not responsibility as burden, but responsibility as power. You stop blaming conditions. You stop bargaining with circumstances. You stop waiting for permission. You realize that creation is always complete in consciousness before it ever appears on the stage of space and time. And this is why speed is never your concern. The outer world cannot move faster than the inner state allows. But when the inner state shifts fully, the outer world rushes to match it as though it had always been waiting. The world is not resisting you. It is obeying you with terrifying accuracy. The reason most people fail is not because they lack faith. It is because their faith is divided. They affirm with the lips and deny with the feeling. They declare with the mouth and contradict with the identity. They speak wealth and embody insecurity. And the law chooses embodiment every time. You cannot deceive your I am. You can only define it. And whatever you define it to be, it will faithfully express. The moment you realize that I am is not a phrase, but a throne, you stop taking it lightly. You stop casually attaching it to conditions you despise. You stop uttering it in the presence of fear. You begin to guard it. You begin to choose it. You begin to feel it deliberately. And when you assume a new I am, The world must reorganize itself around that new core, as iron filings arrange themselves around a magnet. This is not hope. This is law. You do not become wealthy by acquiring money. You acquire money because you have become wealthy in identity. You do not become free by escaping struggle. Struggle dissolves because you have assumed freedom. The I am does not travel. It does not improve. It does not evolve by effort. It simply selects. And what it selects, it must express. There is a subtle distinction that, once understood, divides those who dream from those who create. It is the difference between thinking of and thinking from. The world is filled with people who think of what they desire. Very few ever dare to think from it. And this difference alone is why results seem miraculous to some and impossible to others. If I ask you to think of Paris, you may see a faint picture form in your mind. You may imagine its streets, its towers, its cafes, but even as you think of it, you remain where you are. Paris, in your imagination, is over there, distant, removed, something you are observing from afar. You remain separate from the thing you contemplate. But if instead I ask you to think from Paris, something entirely different must take place within you. You cannot think from Paris unless you mentally remove yourself from your present position and place yourself there. You must see the world from that city. You must feel the air of it. You must look out from its windows. You must stand within it. In that moment, Paris is no longer an object of thought. It is the state from which you are thinking. This is the difference between desire and assumption. To think of wealth is to preserve distance. It is to confirm that wealth is not yet yours. It is to gaze upon a future that forever recedes. But to think from wealth is to dissolve the distance entirely. It is to accept the state as present. It is to occupy the identity of one who already possesses. Most people visualize as though they were watching a story on a distant stage. They see money coming, they see checks arriving, they see figures increasing, but they remain rooted in the role of the observer. They watch their desire instead of becoming it. True imagination is not observation, it is occupation. You do not look at the wish fulfilled, you live from it. You do not admire the desired state. You breathe as it. You do not analyze the future. You enter it. When you think about money, you remain bound to the present conditions. You reinforce the awareness of absence. You strengthen the belief that money is something you move toward over time. But when you think from money, you feel no urgency, no striving, no desperate anticipation. You feel the calm authority of one who already has. And this calmness is the signature of possession. This peace is the fingerprint of fulfillment. The man who thinks of wealth feels pressure. The man who thinks from wealth feels stability. The first waits, the second lives. Time itself bows before this distinction. If you think of a future condition, you push it forward in time. You assign it distance. You tell consciousness, not yet. And consciousness, being faithful, echoes your delay. But if you think from the fulfilled state, you collapse the future into the present. You remove the interval. You declare, it is now. And the world begins rearranging itself to match the now you have accepted. Time is not a thing that exists outside of you. It is a function of the mind. You stretch it by waiting. You compress it by assuming. You do not travel into the future by action. You enter the future by state. And once you enter it in consciousness, the world must follow. This is why it is written that 1,000 years in the eyes of the Lord are as a single day. The Lord is your awareness, and in awareness, all states exist now. Delay is never in creation. Delay is only in consent. You are never waiting for wealth to be created. It already exists as a potential state within consciousness. You are only waiting to accept it as identity. The moment you accept it as identity, the waiting ends. This is what people fail to grasp when they say, I have been visualizing for years and nothing has changed. They have been watching a movie, not changing the projector. They have been imagining outcomes without changing the state from which they live. You can imagine abundance all day long and remain rooted in scarcity. If your inner stance is still that of a seeker, the universe does not answer images. It answers positions of being. It does not reward effort. It reflects identity. You say, I am visualizing wealth. I ask, from where are you visualizing? If you are visualizing as one who wants, you will continue to want. If you visualize as one who has, you will naturally have. Thinking from is not pretending. It is not self-deception. It is not fantasy. It is selection. It is moving your center of gravity from the state of lack into the state of possession. When you truly think from wealth, your reactions change before your circumstances do. You walk differently. You decide differently. You respond differently. You no longer feel compelled to prove. You no longer feel threatened by fluctuation. You no longer collapse under temporary appearances, because appearances have lost their authority. When you think from wealth, you do not deny the world. You reassign its meaning. A small balance no longer means failure. It means transition. A delayed payment no longer means danger. It means orchestration. A closed door no longer means rejection. It means redirection. You are no longer interpreting life from fear. You are interpreting it from fulfillment. This shift alone reorganizes the entire psychological landscape. Anxiety weakens, comparison fades, desperation dissolves. The frantic mental rush slows into quiet certainty. And this is the soil in which material change takes root. You cannot force the external world to change while you remain internally unchanged. But you cannot remain internally changed without the external world eventually yielding. This is why speed often surprises those who finally cross the threshold from thinking of to thinking from. Years of struggle end in weeks. Long periods of stagnation break suddenly. Conditions that appeared rigid soften almost overnight. Not because the law suddenly began to work, but because the obstruction of separation was removed. The moment you stop thinking of money as something ahead of you and begin thinking from money as something behind you, the entire causation reverses. You stop climbing toward supply and begin radiating from it. The world no longer decides what you can feel. Your feeling decides what the world can become. And understand this clearly now, visualizing is not looking at a picture. It is entering a garment. It is clothing consciousness with a form and wearing it as self. If you merely see yourself with money, you remain outside the condition. If you feel yourself as the one who naturally has money, you have crossed the threshold of creation. The true imaginal act is always first person. You do not watch yourself succeed. You succeed. You do not imagine yourself happy. You feel happy. You do not observe yourself secure. You rest as security itself. And rest is the key. The state you truly occupy always feels like rest. It feels like home. It feels like normalcy. It does not feel like effort. If your imagination feels strained, you are likely still looking at your desire, not living from it. The sign that you have entered the state is not excitement. It is relief. It is the quiet cessation of hunger. It is the end of seeking. The world has trained you to believe that desire is fulfilled through motion. I tell you, it is fulfilled through position, not where the body stands, but where the self stands. You do not manifest what you pursue. You manifest what you permit yourself to be. And the instant you permit yourself to be the one who has, the machinery of creation begins its silent rearrangement. From that moment forward, your actions no longer strive. They express. Your choices no longer grasp. They flow. Your movements no longer beg. They authorize. Thinking from wealth does not mean reckless spending. It does not mean loud displays. It means quiet authority. It means internal certainty. It means having without needing to announce. The wealthy state is not flamboyant. It is grounded. It makes no effort to prove itself, because it does not question itself. And this is why appearance must eventually conform. The world cannot resist conviction without tension, and tension cannot withstand calm. Time, space, circumstances, people, contracts, opportunities, all these are secondary servants. They respond to the sovereign state first. And when the sovereign state changes, the servants rearrange themselves without announcement. The man who thinks of wealth watches the clock. The man who thinks from wealth does not measure time. He inhabits fulfillment, and fulfillment does not wait. There is a myth that has enslaved man more deeply than any chain ever forged of iron. It is the myth that effort creates reality. It is the belief that systems are causes. It is the superstition that movement in the outer world is what brings change in the inner world. And because man believes this, he labors endlessly, exhausts himself, repeats the same gestures, the same struggles, the same patterns, and wonders why his life so often returns him to the same conditions. He studies methods, he follows formulas, he seeks strategies. He imitates the visible success of others. He runs from one technique to the next, from one promise to another, always convinced that the next adjustment in the external world will finally produce the change he longs for within. And yet, despite all this motion, the state from which he acts remains unchanged. And so his results remain unchanged as well. Action without a change of state is only repetition. It is movement within the same circle. It is the rearrangement of furniture in a room whose foundation has not moved. You may change jobs, locations, partners, habits, or schedules, and still find yourself standing before the same limitation, wearing a different costume. Not because life is cruel, but because identity has remained untouched. You do not produce a new life by rearranging circumstances. You produce a new life by rearranging self. Every financial system ever devised, every economy ever formed, every method ever taught is only a channel. It is never the cause. It is only a pathway prepared by the law to express a state that has already been accepted. The same system can make one man rich and leave another unchanged. The same opportunity can elevate one and confuse another. The difference is never the system. It is always the state. Man believes that money is earned by action because he sees effort preceding reward. He does not see the invisible decision of identity that preceded both. He sees the bridge, but not the river that called the bridge into being. He sees the harvest, but not the seed of assumption that was planted long before. When I tell you not to pursue money, I am not urging passivity. I am revealing causation. The outer pursuit is always secondary. The inner position is always primary. When you chase money, you confess by your chase that you are not it. When you seek security, you admit by your seeking that you do not possess it. When you strive for abundance, you declare by your striving that abundance is not yet your state. Desire expressed as pursuit preserves lack. Desire expressed as assumption dissolves it. The world teaches you to change the effect and hope the cause will follow. I teach you to change the cause and watch the effect must follow. The world instructs you to act and then believe. I instruct you to believe and then act from that belief naturally. You do not act into a new state. You act from it. The man does not act freely and then become confident. He becomes confident and then acts freely. He does not act abundantly and then become prosperous. He becomes prosperous in consciousness and then acts abundantly as a consequence. He does not act courageously and then feel brave. He feels brave and therefore his actions take the shape of courage. The man is not the actor. He is the stage upon which the state performs. This is what is meant when it is written, "Be still and know that I am God." Stillness is not physical immobility. It is inner cessation. It is the ending of the frantic attempt to force life from the outside. It is the surrender of the idea that you must manipulate the world to obtain permission to be whole. When you become still, in this sense, you no longer ask, "What must I do?" You begin to ask, "Who must I be?" And this single shift changes everything. For the doer changes tasks endlessly, but the beer changes worlds. A man in the state of poverty may work harder than a man in the state of wealth and remain poor. A man in the state of wealth may act with ease and still multiply. Not because effort lacks virtue, but because effort without identity is blind. The law never measures exertion. It measures assumption. Man thinks he must convince life by sweat. Life asks only for consent. You have seen this truth in small ways throughout your life. You have observed how two people facing the same obstacle interpret it differently, and therefore experience different outcomes. One sees threat and shrinks. The other sees opportunity and expands. The event did not change, only the state did. This is why the man who changes methods, but not self, remains bound, while the man who changes self, but not methods, becomes free. The form of his life must reorganize itself to reflect the inner rearrangement. When you finally see this, you no longer exhaust yourself chasing multiple techniques. You no longer measure your days by productivity alone. You no longer consult conditions as authorities. You return to the one true creative act, the selection of state. And from that state, your actions arise without strain, without calculation, without the desperate edge of needing them to work. Action born of fear is frantic. Action born of fulfillment is natural. The outer world has trained you to believe that stillness is laziness and striving is virtue. I tell you that striving is often the confession of unbelief, and stillness is often the posture of certainty. The farmer does not pull upon the seed beneath the soil to make it grow faster. He plants, he waters, and then he waits in quiet assurance. He does not doubt while he waits. He does not dig up the seed each night to see if something is happening. He trusts the unseen work of life. And because he trusts it, the harvest comes. Your imaginal seeds require the same reverence. When you change your state, and then chase confirmation, you interrupt the process. When you doubt while you wait, you disturb the impression. When you fear delay, you prolong it. The moment you truly assume the end, effort becomes unnecessary as a means of proof. Your actions become expressions instead of attempts. You move because movement feels right, not because movement feels required. Most people are exhausted, not because they work hard, but because they work while doubting. They move with the weight of uncertainty upon every step, and this weight drains more energy than labor ever could. When the state is settled, effort becomes light, work becomes simple, movement becomes quiet, and results begin to appear with a smoothness that feels almost undeserved to the old self that believed in struggle. But nothing has been bypassed. The law has simply been obeyed. The man who changes the gay that acts no longer needs to force the action. The state flows into behavior naturally, the way warmth flows from fire. You may continue to use any system you wish. You may work in any field you choose. You may participate in any structure available to you, but never again believe that these are causes. They are only instruments selected by the state you occupy. A poor state will misuse abundance. A wealthy state can utilize anything. The outer method never saves. The inner position always does. This is why the same financial opportunity can ruin one man and elevate another. The opportunity is neutral. The state determines its fate. You were never meant to be a laborer begging reality for reward. You were meant to be a chooser, selecting identity. You do not shape life by adding more effort. You shape life by subtracting separation. The moment you stop trying to become outwardly what you have not yet consented to be inwardly, a great tension leaves you. You no longer argue with the world. You no longer wrestle with outcomes. You begin to move as a center rather than as a seeker. And this is the beginning of true power. Power is not control over others. Power is not command of systems. Power is not influence over circumstances. Power is the quiet certainty that what you assume within must become what you witness without. The man who understands this no longer fears action nor depends upon it. He acts when moved, rests when still, speaks when necessary, waits when appropriate, and in all of it, he remains centered in the state he has chosen as true. When you reach this point, life ceases to feel like a battlefield and begins to feel like a dialogue. The world speaks your assumptions back to you, and you listen not with shock, but with recognition. And so I tell you again, not as poetry, not as inspiration, but as law. Do not chase money. Change the self who is either destined to chase or destined to receive. For the man does not act into his future. He is acted out of his state, and when the state changes, the entire drama must change with it. There came to me once a man who, to the senses, was utterly ruined, not inconvenienced, not delayed, ruined. His business had collapsed. His creditors were calling. His reputation had suffered. He had reached that quiet place in a man's life where pride no longer stands in the way of truth, because there is nothing left to defend. He did not come to me seeking a method. He came seeking relief. And relief, as you now know, never begins in the world. It begins in the state. He told me his story in careful tones, as though every word carried weight. He had invested what little he had in an enterprise he believed would lead him out of his condition. It failed swiftly and completely. The doors closed. The funds vanished. And with them went the fragile sense of control. He had spent years constructing. To the outer eye, There was no path back. There were no opportunities waiting. There were no patrons poised to assist. The world had rendered its verdict, but the law never consults the world. As he spoke, I listened not to his facts, but to his feeling. Facts are shadows. Feeling is substance. And beneath every sentence he uttered was a single, silent assumption. I am finished. This was not spoken aloud. It was spoken in identity, and therefore it was the only sentence that mattered. I told him gently that his condition was not the result of markets or men or misfortune. It was the faithful expression of a state he had worn without question. I did not rebuke him. I did not console him. I invited him to experiment with a new identity. He protested at first, as all do. He spoke of debts, of obligations, of the absolute impossibility of recovery. And I listened patiently, for the mind must empty itself of the old story before it can receive the new. Then I said to him, "You have been faithful to the state of ruin. Now be just as faithful to the state of having." He looked at me in silence. I did not tell him to visualize money raining from the sky. I did not give him a plan of action. I gave him one imaginal task, and one alone. Each night as he fell into sleep, he was to assume that a specific sum of money had already come into his possession. Not vaguely, not poetically, exactly. He was to feel the reality of it, with precision. He was to know the amount as one knows one's own name. He was to let the feeling of relief saturate his body, as though the burden had truly lifted. He chose the sum naturally, not from greed, but from need. It was the exact amount that would settle his most pressing obligations and restore him to emotional equilibrium. Not abundance yet, but sufficiency. The law responds just as faithfully to sufficiency as it does to excess. Each night, as he lay in that drowsy interval between waking and sleeping, he imagined a simple scene, no spectacle, no grand ceremony. He felt a letter in his hands. He felt the texture of the paper. He felt the natural weight of it. He felt the quiet understanding that the matter was resolved. And most important of all, he felt the relief that followed. Not excitement. Relief, the calm exhale of a man whose distress has ended. He did not try to make something happen. He did not watch for signs. He did not measure time. He simply entered that feeling each night and fell asleep in it as naturally as one falls asleep in the memory of a familiar room. For several nights, nothing occurred in the outer world, and yet everything was occurring in the only world where causes move. Within him, the tension began to ease. His conversation softened. His gaze lifted. He no longer moved as a man under sentence, but as a man awaiting confirmation. Then, in a way no reasoning could have predicted, the world rearranged itself. He received word that a distant relative, one he had not seen for years, had passed. He thought little of it at first. There had been no closeness between them, no expectation of benefit. He dismissed the matter almost entirely. Weeks later, he was summoned to hear the handling of the estate, and there in a small office, with dust resting lightly on old ledgers, he learned that he was named as a beneficiary, not prominently, not dramatically, but clearly. When the figure was spoken aloud, it caught in his breath. It was the exact sum he had assumed in imagination. Not near it, not similar, exact. I tell you this not to impress you, but to instruct you. The law does not exaggerate, it matches. It does not approximate, it mirrors. The inner scene was not symbolic, it was literal, and the outer world rendered it with an obedience so precise that his former doubt appeared almost comical in retrospect. The inheritance did not come as reward, it came as arrangement. The death of the relative was not caused by his imaginal act. The event was already latent in the web of human relations. What his assumption did was simply align him with the channel through which his state could express itself lawfully. The law rearranged everything, not in violation of natural order, but in perfect harmony with it. Men met when they needed to meet. Papers were opened when they needed to be opened. Decisions were made as they needed to be made. No force was used. No strain was applied. The state simply sought and found its path. When he returned to me and told me what had happened, he was not overwhelmed with astonishment. He was overwhelmed with recognition. The relief he had felt in imagination and the relief he felt in waking were identical. The feeling had merely moved from the unseen to the scene. He no longer spoke of luck, he spoke of law. I have told this story many times, in many ways, because the mind tends to dismiss what threatens its old allegiance to struggle. It prefers to believe that such events are anomalies, that they belong to rare fortune or coincidence. And yet, what truly requires explanation is not why the money came, but why men remain poor after centuries of evidence that the state is the cause. I have seen men imagine contracts and see them signed. I have seen women imagine gifts and see them arrive. I have seen those on the brink of loss imagine security and watch the world bend into support. All with the same pattern, the same quiet obedience, the same magnificent inevitability. And yet the world insists on crediting chance. Chance is only a name we give to causes we do not see. The law is not partial. It does not favor one and abandon another. It responds to everyone with equal precision. The difference is never in the law. It is in the assumption brought to it. This man did not persuade the inheritance into existence. He selected the state of having, and the inheritance was the channel through which that state could most naturally express itself. Another man might receive the same sum through business, another through partnership, another through collection, another through collection, another through settlement. The form differs. The source never does. The world contains infinite ways for a state to appear. The law selects the path of least resistance according to the network of belief, relationship, and expectancy already in place. What astonishes men most is not the manifestation itself, but the normalcy of its arrival. They imagine miracles will announce themselves with thunder. They do not realize that the law prefers quiet confirmation. The event arrives dressed as coincidence, and only the one who has changed state recognizes it as fulfillment. The man who still doubts says, "It just happened." The man who knows says, "It had to happen." You think you must figure out the how. You think you must design the bridge. You think you must calculate the path. But the bridge is selected by the law. The path is assembled invisibly. Your only responsibility is the state. You imagine the end. The law assembles the means. When you try to assist the law by forcing methods, you muddy the water. When you trust the state, the water clears. The outer world is far more flexible than the doubting mind believes. It is not rigid. It is arranged moment by moment by invisible pressures of assumption. What appears fixed is only what is frequently believed. The moment belief moves, the structure loosens. This is why the man who changes state feels as though the world suddenly becomes cooperative. He thinks doors have opened. He does not know that he has simply stopped pushing against them. When the assumption changes, resistance dissolves. And so I tell you this story not to promise inheritance, nor investment, nor contest, nor sudden fortune in any specific form. I tell it to reveal causation. I tell it to remind you that the impossible is only a name given to transitions. The mind has not yet witnessed. You do not make things happen. You allow states to express. The law does not break. It fulfills. And it fulfills with an exactness that once seen can never be called accident again. There was another whom I remember with great clarity, not because his beginning was tragic, but because his transformation was total, not a correction, not a recovery, a complete reversal of self. He did not come to me as a man merely short of funds. He came to me as a man who had accepted failure as identity. This is always the deeper poverty. He had once known modest success, nothing extraordinary, but enough to build confidence, enough to feel that life was moving in his direction. Then a series of ventures failed in succession. Each loss struck deeper than the one before, not because of the money alone, but because each failure eroded his self-concept. Slowly, quietly, without realizing it, he began to think of himself as a man to whom things do not work out. That sentence never left his lips, but it echoed in his reactions, in his expectations, in his posture, in his tone. It was written in the way he entered a room, and the way he spoke of tomorrow. By the time he came to me, he was not merely bankrupt financially. He was bankrupt imaginatively. He had no picture of himself as successful that did not feel false. He could imagine gains for others. He could imagine abundance in theory. But when it came to himself, The mind resisted as though touching fire. This is the most dangerous condition of all. Not lack of money, but lack of permission to be more. I did not speak to him about finance. I spoke to him about identity. I asked him not what he wanted, but who he believed himself to be. And at first, he answered with conditions. Titles, history, losses. I stopped him gently and said, "None of these are you. These are garments you have worn. Who are you beneath them?" He had no answer, and that silence told me everything. So I gave him a different assignment than the one I gave the ruined man. For this man did not need a specific sum. He needed a new self. Each night, I told him, as he lay in that quiet interval before sleep, he was not to imagine money at all. He was to imagine himself as a successful man in the simplest possible way. Not winning, not receiving, just being. He was to feel himself standing with ease. He was to feel himself speaking with quiet assurance. He was to feel that the future held no threat, that life was not something he was trying to survive, but something that was cooperating with him. At first, he resisted. He said it felt artificial. I told him all assumptions feel artificial when first worn. The old state feels natural only because it has been practiced. A man wears misery so long that joy feels like a stranger. Still, he persisted. Each night he returned not to a scene of getting, but to a posture of being. He practiced feeling respected. He practiced feeling competent. He practiced feeling secure. These were not dramatic scenes. They were quiet states, and quiet states are always the most powerful. During the day, his old inner dialogue would surface. Phrases learned through years of disappointment. It will probably fail. It never works for me. I should not expect too much. And each time one of these arose, he did not fight it. He replaced it. Not with shouting, not with affirmations spoken through clenched teeth, but with a gentle repositioning. He would return inwardly to the feeling of the man he had assumed in sleep. At first, this happened a few times a day, then more often, until eventually the new tone began to answer automatically. When he was corrected, the old self would have shrunk. The new self remained calm. When an opportunity appeared, the old self would have hesitated. The new self stepped forward naturally. When uncertainty arose, the old self would have withdrawn. The new self understood that uncertainty is only the soil in which change appears. Nothing outward had yet changed drastically, and yet everything inward had. This is the point at which most abandon the work. When the inner shift has begun, but the outer world has not yet rearranged sufficiently to confirm it, they become impatient. They interpret delay as failure. They return to the old state for safety. He did not. He remained faithful to the new self, even while the world still reflected traces of the old. Weeks passed, then months. Subtle changes began to appear. Not sudden wealth, but alignment. Conversations that once led nowhere now opened doors. Introductions were made casually, that later proved essential. Small opportunities arose that he would once have dismissed as insignificant, but now accepted as natural. Each acceptance expanded his confidence. Each small result reinforced the new identity. And with identity strengthening, the law began to accelerate its confirmations. A partnership formed where none had existed before. Then another. Then a venture that once would have terrified him now felt appropriate, not because the risk was smaller, but because the man facing it was larger. There came a point, perhaps a year, from the beginning of this transformation, when he realized one morning that he no longer thought of himself as a struggling man at all. The idea felt foreign, almost humorous. It no longer fit. He had not arrived at wealth in one dramatic moment. He had moved so completely into a new state that poverty no longer found a home in him. From that moment onward, the outward growth became visible. Profits increased. Stability followed. His manner changed in public. Others responded to him differently, not because he tried to impress, but because identity speaks without words. Those who had once dismissed him now sought his counsel. Those who had once doubted him now trusted him, not because they had studied his history, but because they felt his state. Years later, when he returned to me to speak of his life, there was no trace of the man who had once defined himself by failure. The old identity had not been corrected. It had been replaced, and he said something to me that revealed the truth far more clearly than any description could. He said, "It is not that my life changed. It is that the man who was living it vanished. This is the miracle most never consider. They want to fix the old self. They want to heal it, strengthen it, improve it. They do not realize that the old self is not meant to be repaired. It is meant to be outgrown. A state does not rise by evolution. It rises by abandonment. When you outgrow a garment, you do not mend it. You remove it. This is the mystery behind all real transformation. The world does not elevate you into wealth. You withdraw from the identity that made poverty necessary. The conditions that once defined you lose their hold when the self that required them disappears. This is why struggle cannot persist when the struggler is gone. The world cannot continue to reflect a state you no longer occupy. It may echo it briefly, as a sound echoes after the source is silent. But the echo fades. What remains is the new voice, and that new voice writes a new world. I tell you this not to promise you a dramatic reversal as a spectacle, but to reveal the lawful process by which all reversals occur. They do not begin in accounts, nor in titles, nor in recognition. They begin in silence, where the one who says, I am, changes what follows those words. You do not change your life by forcing circumstances. You change your life by letting a different I move through it. The old you believes, life happens to me. The new you knows, life comes from me. The old you negotiates with conditions. The new you sets states. The old you asks, will it work? The new you asks, who am I now being? And the natural outcome of that shift is not a single successful event, but a completely different experience of existence. This is why I call it a reversal of life, not merely a reversal of fortune. For fortune is only one garment life wears. Identity is the body beneath. There is a voice that speaks within you more constantly than any other. It does not shout. It rarely announces itself. It murmurs. It whispers. It comments. It reacts. It interprets. And yet this quiet voice is the most powerful force shaping your life. It is the voice you hear when no one else is listening. It is the voice that speaks when the room is silent. It is the voice that answers your questions before you ask them aloud. It is your inner dialogue. You may believe that the great decisions of life are made in dramatic moments. I tell you, they are made in the unnoticed spaces between thoughts. They are made in the tone you take with yourself when you are alone. They are made in the assumptions you repeat so quietly that you no longer recognize them as choices. You ask yourself, perhaps without words, will this work? And the silent answer comes back. It never does. You look at a bill and something murmurs, this is always too much. You think of the future and a quiet voice says, it will be hard. These are not idle observations. They are not harmless habits. They are decrees. For your inner speech is not conversation. It is creation. The mouth may lie, the mind may reason, but the inner dialogue always tells the truth of the state you occupy. It reveals your reigning identity far more accurately than your public declarations ever could. You may tell the world you believe in abundance, while inwardly repeating a lifetime of scarcity in whispers so familiar you scarcely hear them anymore. You may speak optimism aloud, while silently rehearsing defeat. And the law, which never listens to the outer performance, responds faithfully to the private confession. Your bank account is not the result of your labor alone. It is the visible echo of what you have been telling yourself in secret for years. You wonder why money seems to approach some with ease and others with resistance. You imagine they are favored. You imagine they are lucky. You imagine the world is uneven. I tell you, the difference is not outside. It is in what they say when no one hears them. One man silently says, there is always a way. Another silently says, it never works for me. One murmurs inwardly, things tend to work out. Another whispers, I always miss my chance. And life, being no more than a mirror of feeling, answers both with perfect obedience. The inner dialogue is the prayer that never ceases. It is the unbroken ritual that runs day and night. You do not need to kneel for this prayer to work. You do not need to fold your hands. You do not need sacred words. It is spoken in tone, not in language. It is spoken in acceptance, not in ceremony. Most men think they pray only when they intend to pray. In truth, they pray all the time. They pray with fear. They pray with doubt. They pray with resignation. They pray with worry. And they receive the faithful answers to each of these petitions. then wonder why life feels so heavy. You do not get what you want, you get what you agree with inwardly. Every repeated inner sentence is a seed. Some are planted once and forgotten. Others are planted daily with feeling. And the seeds planted with feeling grow with certainty. There are phrases that pass through your mind so often that they have become part of your atmosphere. Money is hard to come by. I'm not good with finances. It's just not my luck. I'll probably lose it again. These phrases do not float in the air. They sink into consciousness. They settle into identity. And identity, once accepted, becomes law. You may trace your financial history back through years of effort and action and circumstance, and it will all appear to make sense on the surface. But below the surface, you will always find the same thread, a silent agreement about what is possible for you. Change the agreement, and you change the pattern. Yet this is where many falter. They attempt to change the outer without touching the inner. They decorate the stage without changing the script. They discipline behavior while leaving belief untouched. And so the old voice continues to speak beneath every new attempt. True reprogramming does not happen by argument. It happens by replacement. You do not silence a voice by fighting it. You silence it by giving consciousness a new sentence to speak with greater authority. When an old phrase of poverty rises, it is not enough to oppose it with hope. Hope does not command. Identity commands. You must replace the sentence not with a wish, but with a decision of self. If the old voice says, "I never have enough," the new voice does not answer, "I hope to have more." It answers, "I am provided for." If the old voice says, "This will fail," the new voice does not argue with evidence. It simply states, "I succeed in what I do." The new voice must be spoken, not with desperation, but with quiet finality, like a verdict, not a plea. At first, this may feel unnatural. The old voice will answer back. It will offer memories, examples, reasons. Let it speak. Do not fight it. Simply return to the chosen sentence. Persistence, not force, is the key. You are not trying to convince the old voice. You are starving it. Every time you refuse to feed it with agreement, it weakens. Every time you supply consciousness with a new sentence of being, that sentence gains authority. And eventually, one voice becomes so dominant that the other fades into insignificance. When the inner dialogue changes, you do not immediately notice fireworks in the sky. The first thing you notice is a shift in emotional posture. You walk into situations with less tension. You interpret events with less threat. You recover more quickly from disappointment. This is the sign that the new state has taken root. From that new state, different actions arise naturally. You speak with more calm. You listen with more trust. You take opportunities you would have once avoided. You decline entanglements you would have once accepted. And without any conscious strategy, your outer world begins to realign. The bank does not respond to your affirmations. It responds to your identity. The figures on the page do not respond to your effort. They respond to your state. And so the account you are trying to change is not the one in any institution. It is the one in consciousness. The world reflects inner bookkeeping. Every inner statement is a deposit or a withdrawal. Every feeling of worth is credit. Every feeling of unworthiness is debt. And the visible world keeps perfect records. This is why two people can earn the same wage and experience entirely different realities of abundance. One feels secure and generous. The other feels anxious and constrained. And in time, their outer situations will reorganize to match their inner ledgers. You are not paid according to your labor alone. You are paid according to your acceptance of worth. This is difficult for the rational mind to accept, because it removes the illusion of randomness. It means that nothing in your life is truly accidental. It means that even what you call misfortune has been agreed to on some level of being. And yet, within this difficult truth lies the greatest liberation. For if your bondage was self-consented, your freedom must be self-consented as well. No outer power can override your inner decree. No system can stop what identity authorizes. No circumstance can withhold what consciousness has accepted as natural. The inner dialogue is the lever by which the unconscious is moved. You do not need to dominate it with volume. You need only to speak with consistency. Day after day, moment after moment, you choose which sentence shall be sovereign. At first, the change feels small, then imperceptible, then inevitable. You begin to notice that the old language no longer fits the new self. Phrases you once used feel foreign. Complaints feel awkward. Doubts feel misplaced. You begin to hear them as though they belonged to another voice. And in truth, they do. They belong to the state you are leaving behind. The moment your inner dialogue changes, the axis of your life turns quietly, and everything that once revolved around the old center begins to shift. People respond differently to you without knowing why. Opportunities present themselves without announcement. Events that once delayed now accelerate, and you may be tempted to say that fortune has changed. In truth, only your conversation has. This is why I say to you, if you would know what your future holds, listen to what you are saying to yourself today, not in your speeches, but in your silences, not in your declarations, but in your reactions, not in your hopes, but in your expectations. The tongue of the invisible writes the script of the visible, and your bank account, like every other condition of your life, stands as a faithful echo of the voice you have chosen to trust within. There is a secret that has been whispered through every scripture, hidden beneath every symbol, buried beneath every ritual, and yet it has always been simple. Feeling is the secret, not thought alone, not words alone, not images alone. Feeling is the living center of creation. You may imagine 1,000 scenes and repeat 1,000 phrases, and yet nothing will move until feeling enters as breath. Feeling is what gives life to the assumption. Without feeling, imagination is only a picture. With feeling, it becomes reality in seed. But I must warn you of a great misunderstanding. Feeling is not emotional excitement. Feeling is not manufactured joy. Feeling is not forcing yourself into enthusiasm. Those are surface motions of the flesh. True feeling is far deeper. It is the quiet acceptance that something is already yours. False emotion is loud. True feeling is silent. When a man possesses something truly, he does not tremble with excitement about it. He rests in it. He does not celebrate its arrival each moment. He assumes its continuity. The house you live in does not cause you daily celebration. The ground beneath your feet does not astonish you each morning. It is simply yours, and because it is yours, you are calm. That calm is the signature of possession. The mistake most make is that they try to feel rich the way they imagine riches look from the outside. They chase the emotion of receiving rather than the state of owning. They seek the thrill of arrival rather than the stability of residence. And so their feeling remains future-bound. You are not called to feel the joy of winning. You are called to feel the peace of having. Ownership does not shout. It settles. If I gave you a great sum unexpectedly, the first moment might bring astonishment. But 1 hour later, the feeling would already be different. It would be quieter. 1 day later, it would be calmer. 1 week later, it would be natural. That final feeling, calm, settled, unquestioning, that is the feeling you must enter now. That is the feeling that commands reality. To feel stability without physical proof is the true discipline of imagination. Stability is not created by what you see. It is created by what you consent to internally as normal. You must learn to let the nervous system rest in a state it has not yet seen with the eyes. This is the art. This is the art. This is the work. This is the crossing of the invisible threshold. When you do not possess a thing physically, your body is trained to respond with contraction. You see absence and feel tension. You see numbers and feel threat. You see delay and feel unease. This reaction is automatic, but it is not law. It is habit, and habit can be re-educated. You cultivate the feeling of stability by asking one simple question and answering it honestly in imagination. How would I breathe if this were already settled? Not how would I celebrate? How would I breathe? Breath never lies. If your breathing becomes slow, and even in imagination, you have entered the state. If your breath remains shallow or hurried, you are still visiting the desire rather than inhabiting it. Security is revealed by the absence of urgency. When something is truly yours, you do not hurry toward it. You move from it. To feel ownership is to feel orientation change. The world rearranges itself subtly around what you accept as yours. Decisions become easier, reactions soften, the sense of risk diminishes. The mind ceases to calculate constantly. You stop bracing. That is the feeling of wealth, not excitement, not indulgence, but reduced internal friction. To feel security without physical money is the great paradox of the law. Yet this paradox is the gateway. The physical reflects the internal, not the reverse. If you wait for physical money to grant you inner security, you have reversed the order and placed yourself again in bondage to shadow. Security must be assumed before it is earned. You do not become secure because wealth arrives. Wealth arrives because security has already been accepted. This is why I say to you that the calm is the proof of possession. When you can think of money without tightening, when you can look at delay without trembling, when you can face uncertainty without collapsing inwardly, then you have entered the state that must harden into fact. Check yourself gently. What happens in your body when you imagine abundance? Does your chest open or contract? Does your breath soften or accelerate? Does your stomach relax or tighten? The body always reveals the true state. You need not force relaxation. That is another strategy of effort. Simply return to the scene of being settled. Sit there gently. Let the nervous system learn that this state is safe. You do not master feeling by command. You master it by familiarity. Return to the assumption often, not with intensity, but with ease. Return to it the way a man returns to his home in thought, casually, naturally, without strain. Do not wrap your feeling in drama. Wrap it in ordinariness. One of the greatest errors in manifestation is the belief that great things must feel dramatic. In truth, the greater the thing, the quieter the feeling, once it is owned. Mountains do not shout. They simply stand. The feeling of possession is not an emotional surge. It is the absence of emotional disturbance. If you desire to feel the secret directly, do this one simple experiment. Imagine that a great sum has already been placed in your keeping, irrevocably. Do not imagine the moment of receipt. Imagine tomorrow morning after it has been yours for a while. Imagine how you would drink your morning cup, how you would sit, how you would look out into the day. If there is rest in the scene, you have found the feeling. If there is still searching, you are still outside of it. The law does not respond to intensity. It responds to conviction. And conviction always feels quiet. The state you are seeking is not emotional elevation. It is emotional neutrality after fulfillment. True belief is not loud. It is settled. This is why those who truly possess rarely speak of their possessions with urgency. There is no need to persuade. There is no need to announce. There is no need to prove. Existence has already agreed. And so it must be with you. Speak inwardly from completion, not toward it. Speak from settlement, not pursuit. Let your inner voice reflect the tone of one who expects continuation, not rescue. The calmness you cultivate is not passive. It is sovereign. It is the calm of one who knows that movement is inevitable without being forced. An anxious mind pushes. A sovereign mind allows. When you no longer feel the need to check, to confirm, to test, to analyze, you have touched the state that creates. When you stop looking for signs, signs begin to appear. The law waits for your nervous system to agree. The moment your body and your identity are no longer in conflict, the world rearranges effortlessly. This is why I say that feeling is the secret, not the feeling of wanting, not the feeling of trying, the feeling of being. You are not trying to believe, you are retiring into belief. And when you rest in it long enough, reality must follow. There is no other outcome. It cannot refuse its own shadow. Now I will give you what you have been waiting for. Not a formula to manipulate life, not a mechanism to force outcomes, not a superstition dressed in ritual, but disciplines of consciousness, simple, precise, and inevitable in their effect when practiced with faith. These are not techniques to get something. They are entrances into a state of being. And once you enter the state, the thing must follow. The first practice is the one I have taught all my life, for it is the royal road into the subconscious. It is what you do at night when the world is quiet and the senses are withdrawing. Before you sleep, your mind is like soft wax. The outer personality loosens its grip. The inner man rises. This is the hour of creation. You do not lie down to escape the day, you lie down to build tomorrow. As you rest upon your pillow, you do not review your failures. You do not analyze your problems. You do not rehearse your fears. You turn your back upon the world of shadows and enter the world of causes. You close your eyes and gently assume that what you desire is already accomplished. You do not imagine how it will come. You imagine what it feels like afterward. You construct the simplest possible scene that implies fulfillment, not spectacle, not drama. A simple confirmation, a balanced scene, a hand resting in calm, a voice that says, "It is settled." And then you do the most important thing a man can do in creation. You accept it as real without effort. You do not strain. You do not chase sensation. You allow the assumption to sink into you like warmth into water. If your mind wanders, you bring it back gently, not with force, with authority. The same authority with which you would guide a child back to bed in kindness and certainty. And when the feeling of naturalness begins to appear, when the body relaxes, when the breath softens, when the need to check disappears, you surrender to sleep as one who has already planted the seed. Sleep is the seal. Sleep is the agreement. Sleep is the silent yes of consciousness. Night after night, you do this. Not as a bargain with life, as a declaration of identity. The second practice is the government of your inner speech. This is not about willpower. It is about loyalty. Loyalty to your assumed state. From the moment you rise until the moment you return to rest, your mind is speaking. Even when your lips are silent, your inner mouth speaks constantly, and that inner voice is issuing orders more powerful than any spoken command. Most men live unaware that they are praying all day long. Their prayers are not spoken in temples. They are whispered in hesitation, in complaint, in self-doubt, in resignation. Every "I can't," every "it's hard," every "I never have enough," every "maybe someday." These are not thoughts, they are decrees, and the world obeys them. So you do not merely insert positive phrases, you replace the speaker, you change the one who is talking. When the old voice speaks in fear, you do not argue with it, you replace it with a new authority. You do not debate shadows, you rule states. When the thought says, "This is too much for me," the new voice says quietly, "All things are working in my favor." When the thought says, "I don't know how," the new voice says, "The way is being revealed." When the thought says, "There is not enough," the new voice says, "My supply is established." You do not shout these inwardly. You speak them with the calm tone of fact. Law does not shout. Law stands. And every time you replace inner speech, you are not fixing a thought. You are shifting position. You are moving from the state of the struggler into the state of the possessor. The third practice is gratitude, but not gratitude that begs. Gratitude that presupposes ownership. There is a gratitude that arises from relief after struggle, that is human. But there is a deeper gratitude that arises from recognition. This is divine. When you say, "Thank you," not because something just appeared, but because you know it must appear, you are no longer waiting on life. Life is moving through you. You give thanks before the harvest, not after, because the seed is already a fact to the farmer. When you spend, you give thanks as one circulating abundance. When you receive, you give thanks as one confirming order. When nothing seems to move, you give thanks as one standing in certainty. This gratitude does not try to change conditions. It reflects identity. A poor man thanks for what he hopes to receive. A wealthy man thanks for what he expects to continue. The fourth practice surprises most men, yet it is one of the most direct ways to awaken authority in consciousness. You speak to money itself, not as a superstition, as a recognition of relationship. For money is not an object, it is a state made visible. It is awareness in form, and awareness responds to awareness. You do not curse it, you do not fear it, you do not beg it, you address it. You say inwardly, "You reflect me. As I rise, you rise. As I am free, you are free. You answer to my state, not my anxiety. You are not commanding coins. You are commanding your own subconscious relationship to supply. This breaks the ancient spell of worship. For the moment you speak to it as one who is higher than it, the inversion collapses. The fifth practice is perhaps the most transformative of all, for it takes the assumption out of the isolated moment and stretches it across time. One day each week you live entirely from the assumed state, not outward recklessness, inward consistency. You awaken that day as though your desire had been fulfilled long ago. You move as though lack were a forgotten language. You listen as one who is not searching. You decide as one who is not compensating. You do not spend foolishly. You do not perform wealth. You embody normality. You allow the nervous system to remember what it feels like to live without bracing. This day re-educates identity, and identity is the soil in which manifestation grows. You will find that when this day ends, something has shifted quietly. You will not feel magical. You will feel aligned, and alignment is power. These practices are not separate. They are one movement viewed from different angles. Night impresses the seed. Day protects it with speech. Gratitude feeds it. Authority stabilizes it. Embodied living multiplies it. And now I must tell you something that few are willing to accept. These practices do not work because they are repeated. They work because you become faithful to the state they imply. Repetition without loyalty is noise. Repetition with loyalty is law. Do not measure your faith by how intensely you perform these practices. Measure it by how naturally you return to the assumed state when you fall. Falling is human. Returning is mastery. There will be days when the old voice returns loudly. There will be moments when the world contradicts you sharply. These are not signs of failure. They are invitations to reinforce identity. You do not fight appearances. You nourish states. You do not argue with weather. You change climate. If your mind seeks proof before belief, you will wait forever. If you supply belief without proof, proof must follow. The law does not ask if you deserve it. The law does not ask if you are ready. The law only asks what you are assuming to be true. And it answers that. You do not practice to persuade something outside you. You practice to remain loyal to what you have decided you are. That is all. And that is everything. Now we must go where most teachings refuse to go. Not into technique, not into ritual, not into imagination itself, but into the hidden emotional chains that quietly sabotage the assumption before it can ever take root. For I tell you plainly, many who hear these truths nod with their minds, yet reject them with their hearts. And what the heart rejects, the world cannot reflect. The first chain is guilt. There are those who feel a silent shame for wanting money. They would never say it aloud, yet within themselves they feel that desiring abundance somehow makes them impure, selfish, less spiritual. This guilt did not come from truth. It came from misinterpretation. It came from generations who confused poverty with purity and suffering with virtue. But I ask you this, did the tree refuse to grow because it feared taking space? Did the sun dim itself because it feared being too bright? Did the ocean apologize for its fullness? Nature never apologizes for abundance. Only man does. You were not created to apologize for wanting to live well. You were created to express life fully. To desire is not corruption. To desire is movement. Desire is the voice of life itself, urging expression. When you feel guilt for wanting money, you are not resisting wealth. You are resisting expansion, and life always seeks to expand. Cast that guilt aside. It was never yours. The second chain is unworthiness. Many secretly believe that abundance is for others, that there are chosen ones, luckier ones, smarter ones, more deserving ones, and they place themselves quietly outside the circle of permission. They do not openly say, I am unworthy, but they live as though it were true. Let me tell you something, that no circumstance, no failure, no mistake has ever changed. Worthiness is not earned. Worthiness is intrinsic. You were worthy before you ever succeeded. You were worthy before you ever failed. You were worthy before you ever tried. The sun does not rise only for those who behave well. Existence does not distribute oxygen based on merit. Life itself is unconditional. When you assume wealth while feeling unworthy, your assumption and your self-concept collide. And in that collision, the weaker belief collapses. And it is always the assumption that collapses first. If worthiness is not addressed, you must no longer ask, "Do I deserve this?" That question belongs to a false court. The true question is only this: will I accept what consciousness is willing to express as me? And consciousness is always willing. The third chain is fear of change. Strange as it sounds, many fear wealth, not because they doubt it, but because they sense what it would require of them internally. To change your bank account is to change your rhythm. To change your rhythm is to change your identity. And the human mind clings desperately to what is familiar, even when what is familiar is painful. The known hell feels safer than the unknown heaven. Some fear that if they become abundant, they will be exposed. Others fear they will be abandoned. Others fear they will no longer belong to their past. Some fear they will disappoint others by rising. These fears are not about money at all. They are about belonging, about safety, about identity. But understand this: your true identity was never your struggle. You only mistook it for that, because you lived in it so long. You are not betraying yourself by changing. You are remembering yourself. The fourth chain is fear of losing identity. There are those who secretly cling to the story of the one who struggles, the one who sacrifices, the one who survives. Their entire self-image has been built around endurance, around labor, around making it through. And the idea of ease feels like betrayal. Who will I be if I am no longer the one who fights? You will be the one who lives. Struggle is not a personality. Suffering is not a destiny. Hardship is not a badge of honor. They are states that once had purpose, but their purpose ends the moment their lesson is learned. You do not become smaller by releasing struggle. You become free. The fifth chain is religion wrongly interpreted. There are those who were taught that wealth is sin, that the rich are corrupt, that money is the root of evil. But this is not what the ancient texts mean. They do not condemn possession. They warn against possession by possession. Money in the hand is a tool. Money in the heart as a master is bondage. The warning was never against abundance. It was against idolatry. It was never against wealth. It was against division. For when man believes that life comes from money, he has replaced consciousness with symbol, and that is the true fall. The sixth chain is the programming of sacrifice. Many were raised to believe that to have, one must suffer, that joy must be paid for with exhaustion, that abundance must be earned through pain. And so even when wealth begins to approach, they unconsciously recreate struggle because their nervous system does not yet trust ease. They know how to survive. They do not yet know how to receive. But receiving is also a skill, and it too must be learned. You were not designed to barely endure life. You were designed to participate in it fully. Let me tell you the truth beneath all these chains. You are not blocked by money. You are not blocked by circumstance. You are not blocked by time. You are only blocked by identity that has not yet been updated. And identity changes not through force, but through quiet assumption. Each night you assume. Each day you speak from your new state. And each moment you feel even the smallest hint of naturalness. Identity loosens. And identity shifts. You are not becoming someone new. You are releasing who you never were. And as that false self dissolves, wealth is not chased, it is recognized. Because it was never absent, it was only disallowed. Now we come to the edge of the great mystery, the place where technique dissolves into knowing, where effort gives way to revelation. For if consciousness is the only reality, then what you call the world is not a solid thing at all. It is a living dream. You believe you walk upon firm ground. Yet I tell you the ground itself is held together by awareness. You believe the world is something happening to you, yet all that happens is happening in you. As you think you move through reality, but reality moves through the state you occupy. The world is not a machine. The world is a dream made stable by repetition. And you are not inside the dream. You are the dreamer. Tonight you may begin to grasp this, not as philosophy, not as a strange idea, but as a lived recognition. The same way you awaken inside a night dream and realize, this is my dream. So too may you awaken inside this waking world and realize, this also is my dream. The body you wear is not the dreamer. It is the instrument. It is the garment consciousness puts on in order to experience texture, sound, resistance, gravity, sensation. It is not the source. It is the receiver. It is the radio, not the broadcast. You do not see with eyes. You see through eyes. You do not think with the brain. You think through the brain. You do not live in the body. The body lives in your awareness. And money too belongs to this symbolic layer. It is not substance in itself. It is agreement. It is idea made visible. It is trust crystallized into number. It is the language the dream uses to move energy from one form to another. But never mistake the symbol for the source. If the symbol disappears, the source remains. If the symbol multiplies, the source remains the same. The power was never in the number. The power was always in the dreamer. When you truly begin to feel this, a great quiet comes upon the mind. Anxiety loosens. Striving softens. The frantic grasping that once ruled your days begins to look childish, like a character inside a play, believing the stage lights control the story. You begin to sense that events are not attacking you. They are responding to you. You begin to feel that life is not testing you. It is reflecting you. And in this realization, fear has no place to stand. For who fears the shadows once he knows he is the light? You are not manifesting money anymore at this level. You are allowing the dream to rearrange itself around your settled knowing. You are no longer trying to make something happen. You are letting what you are be shown. And the dream always obeys identity. If you believe you are small, the dream compresses. If you believe you are limited, the dream restricts. If you believe you are separate, the dream divides. But if you know you are source, the dream opens. You no longer wake asking, what will today bring? You awaken knowing, today must mirror who I am. And who are you? Not the history, not the account balance, not the successes, not the failures, not the name, not the title. You are the awareness in which all of those appear. The one who dreamed himself into a body. The one who dreamed himself into a story. The one who dreamed himself into limitation for the pleasure of remembering power. This is why I have always told you, you are not here to get things. You are here to awaken from false smallness, and money, for most, is the door. For nothing exposes separation faster than lack. Nothing exposes fear faster than debt. Nothing exposes identity faster than struggle. So money becomes the loudspeaker through which consciousness calls itself back to remembrance. And when remembrance occurs, the dream must change, not as a reward, not as a miracle, but as alignment. You do not become rich because you deserve it. You become rich because the dream now matches the dreamer. This is the final inversion. You once thought the world created you. Now you know you created the world. You once thought money defined your worth. Now you know worth is what gives money meaning. You once thought the body was the self. Now you know the self wears the body. And in this knowing, strain disappears. What remains is quiet authority, not arrogance, not superiority, authority. The authority of one who no longer asks permission from his reflection. The authority of one who no longer negotiates with symbols. The authority of one who knows I am the one who is being mirrored. From this level, your assumptions are no longer forced. They are relaxed. They are not rehearsed desperately. They are lived quietly. The dream obeys faster, not because you demand, but because you no longer resist. And this is the final secret of wealth. Effort belongs to those who believe the world is solid. Ease belongs to those who know it is fluid. The moment you stop trying to push the dream begins to carry you. You float where once you swam. And the river never asks the swimmer if he deserves the current. The river moves because movement is its nature. so too does abundance flow as its nature. When resistance ends, you do not command the dream by shouting at it, you command the dream by recognizing it, and recognition is silent. Now I offer you no longer an idea, I offer you a covenant with yourself, not a wish, not an experiment done in doubt, a living assumption carried across time. 90 days, not as a superstition, as a transformation of identity. For consciousness does not change through intensity alone, it changes through persistence. A man may feel inspired for one night and still awaken the same. A man may feel powerful for a moment and yet return to his old state by morning. But a man who remains faithful to a single assumption for 90 days will not be the same man who began, because identity cannot resist repetition. So I give you this challenge, not as pressure, not as force, but as an initiation. For if you will hold one state for 90 days without abandoning it, you will cross a threshold that cannot be uncrossed. For 90 days, you will no longer live as one who hopes, you will live as one who knows. For 90 days, you will no longer ask, will it happen? You will live as one to whom it is already happening. For 90 days, you will no longer negotiate with appearances, you will stand still in assumption. And I speak now with great clarity. This is not 90 days of trying to feel wealthy. This is 90 days of deciding that wealth is your identity. There is a great difference. Trying still admits doubt. Deciding ends the debate. Each morning, before the world touches you, you will touch your state. Before news, before responsibilities, before memory, before identity, there will be assumption. You will feel into being what you have chosen to be. Not in excitement, in quiet recognition. Each night, before sleep gathers you into silence, you will once again return to your chosen state. Not to check progress, not to measure results, but to rest as one who knows the seed is already in motion. And in between these two moments, the opening and the closing, you will live the day not as a performer, but as a possessor. This does not mean pretending in action. It means remaining loyal in feeling. If doubt arises, you will not wrestle with it. You will not argue with it. You will simply return to the state. Again and again and again. Not in frustration, in devotion. For this is not a battle. This is a remembrance. And you will keep a record. Not a record of money. Not a record of outcomes. But a record of states. Each day you will note not what happened, but who you were. Were you calm? Were you anxious? Were you rested within? Were you hunting outside? Did you speak from possession? Did you react from lack? The diary is not to judge yourself, it is to reveal patterns. For what you observe without condemnation begins to dissolve. And I warn you gently, do not look for signs. The man who watches the oven every minute never allows the bread to rise. Signs follow assumption. They do not lead it. If you search for proof, you re-enter the state of separation. You stand again as one who doubts the soil, and the soil will respond accordingly. You persist not because you see movement, but because you stand in law. The sun does not rise because the world believes in it. It rises because rising is its nature. So too must your state express, because expression is its nature. None of these 90 days are about forcing life. They are about staying in agreement with what you have chosen to be. You will notice something strange before long. At first, you will be holding the state with discipline. Then one day you will realize the state is holding you. You will notice that your reactions change before your circumstances do. You will respond differently to the same events. You will breathe differently in the same moments that once tightened your chest. You will listen without that inward leaning forward that once came from need. These are not small changes. They are the signs of identity shifting. And when identity shifts, the mirror has no choice but to follow. Some will see their outer world change quickly. Others will see the inner world change first. Both are movement. Both are proof. Both are law at work. Do not hurry the reflection. The reflection is obedient. Now listen to me carefully. These 90 days are not about discipline born of pressure. They are about faith born of knowing. If you carry this as a burden, you will grow tired. If you carry it as truth, you will grow steady. And steadiness is power. The sailor does not command the wind, he sets the sail. The wind has always been present. You do not command wealth, you set identity. Abundance has always been present. And at the end of 90 days, something will be different. Either you will see the outer world begin to bow, or the inner world will have already become unshakable. Often both. But one thing is certain, you will not be the same person who began. For no man can live 90 days in a state without becoming it. And now I speak not as a teacher, not as a mystic, but as one consciousness speaking to another. If you feel even the slightest stirring as these words enter you, if something in you is quietly saying, this is true, then this moment is already part of your bridge of incidents. This is not coincidence. This is recognition. And recognition is creation's first movement. You have not walked this far to gain a thing. If that were all you sought, you could have turned back at the first promise of technique, at the first whisper of method. But something deeper than wanting has brought you here. Something older than fear. Something that remembers before the mind was taught to forget. You are not here to get wealth, you are here to awaken. For wealth is not the prize. Wealth is the shadow. The substance is being. The currency is I am. And whatever follows those two words becomes the world you live in. You do not manifest money as something separate from you. You manifest as money when you change what you are. This is the great inversion that the world has hidden beneath noise and labor and superstition. Men chase effects while ignoring causes. They plead with life while denying their own name. They seek in markets what can only be claimed in being. When you say, I am in fear, fear becomes your habitation. When you say, I am in lack, lack becomes your dwelling. When you say, I am in power, the world bends. No priest can change it for you. No teacher can do it in your place. No ritual can reach where identity has not gone first. You change your life by changing your I am. And I tell you now, with the weight of every scripture behind me, this is the pearl of great price. Not money, not success, not fame, not comfort. Identity. The moment a man discovers that he does not live inside circumstances, but that circumstances live inside his state, he has found the treasure that cannot be taken. Everything else becomes secondary. Health bows to it. Time bows to it. Money bows to it. People bow to it. History bows to it. Not because the man is great, but because the state he occupies is sovereign. And that sovereignty has never been outside you. It was never locked behind merit. It was never gated behind lineage. It was never reserved for the holy or the chosen. It was given with consciousness itself. You have lived many lifetimes as a beggar of shadows. You have prayed to reflections. You have asked mirrors to become suns. And still, beneath all the asking, the one who could answer waited silently for you to speak. His true name? That name was never whispered in temples. It is spoken every time you say I am, not as sound, as being. You will leave this moment and the world will still look familiar. The walls will stand, the streets will remain, the same figures will pass you by. But if even one assumption has shifted within you, you will never again walk that world in the same way. You will begin to notice something subtle and holy. You will see that the world listens. It listens not to your lips, but to your self-concept. It listens not to your wishes, but to your agreement. It listens not to your words, but to your state. And the more quietly you hold a state, the more loudly the world will echo it. You will realize that nothing outside you has ever had authority over you except what you first granted inside. You will see fear collapsing without argument. You will see struggle loosening without battle. You will see doors open that you did not knock upon, because doors are not opened by hands, but by states. And in these moments, you will be tempted to call it miracle, but you will know better. You will know it is law, not a law written by men, a law written into being itself. A law that says consciousness must express what it assumes itself to be. If you assume yourself to be small, life must agree. If you assume yourself to be limited, life must comply. If you assume yourself to be sovereign, life must reorganize. This is not cruelty. This is not punishment. This is mathematical intimacy. Existence cannot lie to what you believe yourself to be. And now I leave you not with hope, not with instruction, not even with promise, but with a remembrance. You were never meant to chase the world. You were meant to choose yourself. You were never meant to beg the mirror. You were meant to become the source. You were never meant to manifest money. You were meant to manifest as money, as value, as flow, as supply, as confidence, as circulation. You change your fortune by changing your name within. You do not wait for life to crown you. You crown yourself inwardly, and life follows. Now let there be silence inside you for a moment. Not emptiness, presence. Let the noise drop. Let the striving fall away. Let the how dissolve. And listen not for a voice outside you. Listen for what remains when all questions stop. That which remains is what you are, and that is the only creator there has ever been.